All right, so good evening, everyone. Thank you all for getting on. I know people are still going to be hopping on throughout this presentation. We want to thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Erin McGoldrick, and I'm the North Carolina Director of Fitness, and we're just really thrilled to have you on your Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. learning more about heart health. So tonight, we are honored to welcome two exceptional cardiologists that are located right here in North Carolina to discuss heart health with all of you. Dr. Shah is a passionate cardiologist, and he was voted Best Doctor in the Raleigh's Best 2022 competition, so that's very exciting. And at a young age, he was inspired to pursue medicine after his grandfather passed away suddenly from a heart attack. He's dedicated to advancing cardiovascular health and enjoys spending time with his family, embracing sports and travel. Joining him is going to be Dr. Kelly, Chairman of Cardiology at UNC Rex Hospital and the Board President of the American Heart Association in the Triangle area. Dr. Kelly's expertise spans from having his work published in leading medical journals to his recently acclaimed book on symptom management. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Shah and Dr. Kelly, and we're really excited and privileged to learn from their insights on heart health tonight.
Thanks so much, Erin, for the introduction. Can I just get a thumbs up and make sure you can hear us clearly? Okay, perfect. All right, well, we're super excited to chat with everyone here tonight as part of the wind down of the Transformation Challenge, and congratulations to everyone who participated in it. I am a very proud Orange Theory member myself. I go to the Midtown Raleigh studio and was excited for the opportunity for the two of us to talk to all of you about some of the science behind how exercise can affect your heart and the impact that that has on your health and life in general. So during some parts of this discussion tonight, it's going to get a little technical, but the goal is really to help ground all of the theories that you may be hearing about exercise, things like VO2 max, heart rate, and training zones, and give you a good understanding of how those concepts came to be and why we think they're really important for your health and how you can use them as you exercise, completing the Transformation Challenge and beyond. So as Erin mentioned, Dr. Shah and I are both cardiologists at UNC Rex Hospital in Raleigh. We'd love to see any of you if you're concerned you could have a heart problem. Hopefully, though, we'll be seeing you at Orange Theory and not at the hospital. So we're going to show you the agenda in the next slide. We're going to start with just a crash course in the basics of cardiology so you can understand how the heart works. We're then going to talk about what happens in the body during exercise, both short and long term. We're going to finally talk about the impact that this has on your health and what kind of health benefits you can expect from a life of exercise. And then we'll open it up in whatever remaining time we have, which will hopefully be a lot, to a Q&A. And so we're going to answer questions that we received in advance of this, as well as questions that are submitted through the chat. So if you think of something as we're going, go ahead and put it in the chat. And I think Erin and Tommy and others are going to monitor that and share those questions with us toward the end. And if you're feeling bold, feel free to jump on and turn on your camera and ask us a question straight ahead. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Shah. He's going to take us through the crash course in cardiology. So go ahead.
So thanks again, Erin. Thanks, Tommy. It's great to be here. Thanks for everyone who's calling in from here locally and afar. It's nice to be here with Chris, not only my colleague, but good friend as well. So look forward to chatting with you guys, and we'll keep this nice and loose. Feel free to weigh in whenever. So let's talk about the heart itself. As you guys remember from high school biology, the heart really is a chamber. It's a pump. It's a receptacle and receiving blood and getting blood out to the rest of the body. And obviously, in the opinion of two cardiologists, the most important important organ in the body, right? So the atria are the top chambers of the heart, and that's what collects the blood, the receptacles of the blood. And what happens with the ventricles is that the blood gets pumped out of the heart through the ventricles. They're considered the bottom chambers of the heart. And when we talk about the right side of the heart, which is the left side of the screen where the blue tubes come into the right side of the heart, that receives the oxygen depleted blood used up by the muscles and the organs from the body and pumps it straight to the lungs where they get fresh oxygen. There, after it's received the oxygen, the lungs then send the blood back to the heart full of oxygen, nutrients, etc. And from there, it gets pumped to the rest of the body. So if you think of the heart, and we really think of the heart as part of the circuit of the body, right? So it's part of the systemic circuit, it's part of the cardiac circuit and the pulmonary circuit. And essentially, this slide is a really neat way of kind of deconstructing a lot of big picture thing, or into a nice way of looking at the heart itself as a circuit where, you know, we are that little body on the bottom, and from our body, all the blood is being used up by the oxygen is being used up by the muscles and pumped out to the right side of the blood, or to the heart, where it then goes to the lungs. Over in the lungs, gets fresh oxygen, comes back to the heart, to the left side of the heart, and then that continues forth and pumps the blood out of the heart, back to the body, back to your muscles, back to your organs when you're exercising, when you're asleep, and when you're at rest. So near and dear to me as a cardiac electrophysiologist is the natural pacemaker of the heart. So all of us have a natural pacemaker that lives inside of our heart. And that pacemaker drives our heart to increase the heart rate, decrease the heart rate whenever our body needs that increase or decrease in heart rate. So what is the main pacemaker of the heart? That's called a sinoatrial node. It's a cluster of cells collected on the right side of the heart on the top chamber. And that's where all the circuitry really originates from and sends signals to the rest of the heart, signaling to squeeze and beat. When we talk about the average heart rate, and we also look at the average peak heart rate, and that's the maximum amount of heart rate that we would like to achieve, especially during exercise. So 220 minus age is one algorithm we use as cardiologists, as physicians, to give our patients an idea of what their peak heart rate should be during exercise. There is a more mathematical equation that is out there. We just put it on here for your education, for the folks that are more scientifically based inclined, where we use 208 minus 0.7 times age. Of course, these things can be affected by various factors, including genetics. So as a very simple marker for our patients, 220 minus age is a good way to calculate your average peak heart rate. So the purpose of the heart, as we talked about before, it is there to pump oxygen-rich blood and nutrient-rich blood throughout the vascular system to support the metabolic needs of the organs, including your muscles, okay? And the cardiac output, which will be a key term that we kind of define and get into, is really the stroke volume times the heart rate. And what is that stroke volume? Well, that it is what it really sounds like. It's the volume of blood that returns to the heart, and with each and every pump is effectively pumped out of the heart to the rest of the body. And of course, the heart rate is how fast or how slow your heart rate goes, or heart goes. When we talk about this, we want to look at the cardiac output and how it changes, right, with different demands. Whether it's the increase in the metabolic needs of the heart will pump more and the cardiac output will increase. So the magic formula, Chris?
Yeah, so sorry, it's like a little technical, but basically this is all just building up to helping all of you understand concepts like VO2 max, which we're going to get into in a second, heart rate, and heart rate training zones. So Dr. Shah talked about concepts like stroke volume, which is the amount of blood that comes out of the heart when it beats, heart rate, which is how fast the heart is going, driven by that sinoatrial node. And it all comes together in this formula. So oxygen delivery out to the body is equal to the cardiac output times oxygen extraction. So not only how much blood is delivered out of the heart, but how good your body, and in particular your muscles, are at sucking that oxygen out of the blood and using it. And if you break this down even further, it shows us this concept that you may be familiar with of VO2, which is the volume of oxygen delivered out and used by the body is equal to cardiac output, which we said is the stroke volume, the amount of blood coming out of the heart with each heartbeat, times the heart rate, times the amount of oxygen that's sucked out of the blood, the arterial minus the venous oxygen. So you don't need to worry too much about the science of each of these things, but I want to highlight them here because it's really important for understanding what is happening in the body when we exercise. And so at writ large, at a very broad level, when you exercise up to a point where your body is demanding more oxygen than your heart can deliver, your body has to switch, your muscles have to switch to what's called anaerobic or non-oxygen dependent metabolism. And that's when it starts to generate things like lactic acid. Lactic acid will make your muscles sore, your muscles burn, you're going to start to cramp, you're going to feel tired. Lactic acid gets converted into CO2, so you feel short of breath. So basically, when you feel like you're hitting that wall, that's because your heart's ability to deliver oxygen is capping out, and your muscles are demanding more oxygen than your heart can deliver. And that's basically when you hit what's called your anaerobic threshold and when you start to feel bad. And so the purpose of exercising is to start pushing up your VO2 max, pushing up the maximum amount of oxygen that you can deliver out to your body so that you can exercise for longer periods of time at higher levels of intensity. VO2 max is something that can actually be measured directly. So each of you on the call could get hooked up to this crazy looking machine where you like wear a face mask, you're breathing in and out of a tube, and it's measuring the amount of oxygen that you're using. And athletes do this. So professional athletes do this to monitor their training. We do this at the hospital sometimes. There's various places in the triangle where you can have this done for I think a couple $100. And you can sort of see what your VO2 max is now. And then if you complete a training program, you can see how high you can get it. The average VO2 max for an individual person can be estimated using this formula. And the purpose of showing you the formula is not for you to actually do the math or even remember the equation, but to highlight the fact that the VO2 max will go down. So there's a minus sign here as you get older. So as you age, your VO2 max naturally starts to go down. It is generally higher in men than in women for a variety of reasons. And it also tends to go down with weight. So as you age and put on weight, your expected VO2 max is going to go down. For an average healthy adult who is not athletically trained, the VO2 max is somewhere around 35 to 45. As you train and become a really elite athlete, you can see it go to the 70s, 80s, or even in some rare cases up to the 90s. And these are the people that can run, 100 miles at a pass, winning marathons in 2 hours, that kind of thing. Those are the people with incredibly high VO2 maxes. So let's talk a little bit more granular about what happens in the body when you exercise and how your body raises your VO2 up to your VO2 max. In the short term, so if you just like walk into Orange Theory, pop on the treadmill, your VO2 is going to go up a lot. Your body is going to be demanding a lot more oxygen, and your heart is going to work hard to deliver that. So going back to that exact same equation, each of these things is going to go up as you start exercising right away. So you're going to have an increase in heart rate. I think we all know that. We're tracking our heart rate during exercise. We see it going up the harder and harder we push. You're also going to increase your stroke volume, so the amount of blood being pumped out of your heart, because as you exercise and breathe really heavily, that heavy breathing is kind of sucking blood from your vein system into your heart and pushing it through your lungs and out the left side of your heart. And that makes your heart deliver more blood with each contraction. And then finally, you're recruiting more cells in your muscles to work on the oxygen that's being delivered there and use it to generate energy. So each of these things in this equation goes up in the short term. And because of that, you can greatly increase your VO2 as you exercise. Your cardiac output, for example, can go from 5 liters per minute of blood being pumped out of the heart all the way up to 40 liters per minute of blood. But, and so as we exercise at Orange Theory, we'll see our heart rate goes up, and the heart rate is classified into these different zones. And this is like the foundation of the Orange Theory exercise. And the goal generally during Orange Theory is to get into the orange zone, where you're somewhere between 84 and 91% of your max heart rate. I'll point out also that the max heart rate here is generally defined using that equation, 220 minus your age. If you see your max heart rate change, that's because during exercise, you reached a higher heart rate than what that equation predicted. So that becomes your new max heart rate. And the reason that Orange Theory pushes you into this orange zone is because you're there for an hour and you want to push yourself as hard as you can during that hour in a way that is reasonable. And going beyond the orange zone into the red zone, briefly is okay. But if you stick in the red zone, you're going to start generating lactate in your muscles and you're going to feel sore and icky and have to stop. So you want to try to stay below that anaerobic threshold, that lactate threshold in zone 4 and get through the exercise. And if your goal is to lose weight and burn calories, this is really good, because if you look at how we calculate calories burned and that number on the screen during your exercise, it uses these formulas. And basically, it just depends on how high your heart rate is and how much time you spend at that heart rate. It also factors in, by the way, your age and your weight, which is why if you're older, like us, unfortunately, or heavier, you're going to burn more calories during your workout than people who are younger and thinner to begin with. But when it comes to like long-term training, really anything from zone 2 and upward is going to trigger mechanisms in your body that can cause long-term increases in your VO2 max. So that if you exercise for months and months, years and years on end, you're going to be able to achieve levels of VO2 that you could not achieve before. And because of that, your endurance is really going to improve. And going back to that formula, you're going to start to see the long-term ways in which we change your VO2. First of all, you actually can get an increase in the size of your heart chambers. So the left ventricle, for example, which pumps blood out of the body, out of the heart into the body, that oxygen-rich blood coming from the lungs, gets bigger. And so when your left ventricle gets bigger, that means each time your heart contracts, more blood is being pushed out. So your stroke volume goes up. And you'll notice that in this equation, as the stroke volume goes up, for a given VO2, the heart rate can go down. And that's why really well-trained athletes typically have a low resting heart rate, because their hearts are dilated. Each stroke volume is delivering tons of blood out to the body. And so their heart does not need to contract as frequently. And so people who run marathons, people who engage in lots of cardio tend to have low resting heart rates for that reason. That doesn't mean that they can't get their heart rate up to the same level. So they can usually reach the same max heart rate, but their resting heart rate will be lower. This is also why a lot of people find that as they do Orange Theory more and more, it can become harder to get those Splat points. And that's because at that same level of effort that you were doing before, that same VO2, your heart rate isn't going to be as high because your stroke volume is higher. And so if you want to get those Splat points, you're going to have to keep pushing yourself harder and harder, running faster and for longer to get to higher levels of VO2 that require a higher heart rate. In addition to all that, your muscles actually change. So they don't just get bigger because you're lifting weights on the floor, but the capillaries inside of them multiply, and the capillary density in the muscles increases. And by doing this, the muscles that are involved in running or rowing or whatever you're doing are able to extract oxygen from the blood more efficiently because there's more points of contact between the blood and the muscle. And so the muscle can suck up those red blood cells and get the oxygen off of them to produce energy so the muscles can contract and relax. And then finally, again, going way back to like high school bio, probably for most of us, you get an increase in mitochondria in the muscles. And mitochondria are parts of the cell that are literally process oxygen to make ATP, which is the unit of energy in the cell. And so through all of these things, which are long-term changes, your max VO2 will go up. And I put at the bottom here, no pain, no gain. This is true. Unfortunately, if you do not exercise, you are not going to trigger these mechanisms and you are not going to get these long-term gains. And so the only way to become an athlete is to do the work. So in this next part, we're going to talk about the impact on health. And speaking of doing the work, I pose a theoretical question here, which is, why don't our bodies just all look like this? Why, like
I thought you looked like that.
Yeah, this is actually a picture of me. No, okay. So like, why don't your bodies look like this, right? Like, you know, if the goal of the human body is to, you know, get us away from wild animals and, you know, support us, you know, why wouldn't we just be genetically engineered to be muscular with high VO2s all the time? And the answer is that we are not living in a manner that our evolution is suited to. We live on the left in society where calories are abundant. Food is readily accessible to most people most of the time. And exercise for most people is pretty rare. You know, most people drive everywhere they go, and they really only do exercise when they're walking from the car to their office or back. But what we're built for is a time where calories are quite rare, and maybe you only eat once every few days. And exercise is an everyday part of your life that's completely unavoidable and inevitable. And because we're built for these times, we are sort of mal-suited, I would say, to our current times. And the body naturally wants to hoard calories as fat in case a famine comes, which is why, you know, any excess calories that you eat are going to be stored right on your body, just in case there's no meal tomorrow. And the body also naturally wants to maintain as little muscle as possible to do what it has to do, because muscle is metabolically expensive. Supporting all that muscle and keeping all that muscle going costs a lot of calories. And, you know, we evolved in a time where calories were scarce. And so if you don't exercise, you are not going to be muscular, you are not going to have good endurance, and you're going to be obese. And the sad truth is that most people don't exercise. So I know we're speaking to a highly selective crowd here of highly motivated people, but you need to realize you're like in the 1%. Because if you look across the entire population, a full third of adults get less than 10 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity. That's zone 2 or higher. And if you look just one bar over, you can see that another 20% of people get under 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity or higher. So most people are spending under 2 hours per week in zone 2 or higher. Thankfully, at Orange Theory, we're being pushed to do a lot more. And so we're in the range that is recommended, which is 150 minutes per week or more. But this isn't the case for most people. And that is why, unfortunately, most of the population is not that healthy. Dr. Shah is going to take us through a couple of these slides, looking at different studies that kind of highlight where we're at as a population and I think what our goals really ought to be. Yeah, back to you.
Thank you. So, the big thing for these next few slides is just to see the trends. It's sort of like apply some science and some real scientific knowledge behind where our understanding is with cardiovascular fitness and where Orange Theory can help us get to where we want to be. So if you look at this first slide, it really looks at the trends in obesity from early 1999 to 2000 to 2018, and as you can see very clearly, not only is obesity trending upwards at a pretty alarming rate, especially from 2011 and beyond, but also severe obesity is also going up. And we see this every day, right? We see this every day, either as clinicians, physicians in the healthcare field, those folks who are on here as Orange Theory enthusiasts, as well as trainers, we see this trend. So we know that there are clear benefits of exercise. So coming from the two of us, what do we tell our patients? What do you guys hear from your community that really hit home points of exercise? So number one, increased muscle mass. That actually increases your basal metabolic rate, right? If you increase the muscle mass, your muscles are using more over time, which increases your metabolic rate, and that improves your overall exercise tolerance and your exercise, the benefits of exercise. The other thing, exercise is a beautiful way to lower your blood pressure naturally. It is much better, obviously, than to use a pill. Sometimes we are sometimes we're resigned to using medicines to help patients lose or lower their blood pressure. But the benefits of exercise and lowering blood pressure has been a test of time that is just one of probably the biggest gains for us as cardiologists in our field. Not only that, exercise can help lower your cholesterol naturally. Okay, there's an increased sensitivity to insulin, which is a good thing. That helps reduce the incidence of diabetes, and it can help improve sleep and even your mood. It also helps lower the risk of osteoporosis, and as we get older, especially, it helps reduce the risk of injury. So here is a somewhat complicated figure, but the main point of this is we look at cardiorespiratory changes in fitness, which is this x-axis, and we look at over here to look at all-cause mortality, and then over here on this side, you see the changes in BMI or your weight. You can see that if one is to stay the same weight, that if there is a gain in exercise or a gain in fitness, there's a decrease in the mortality. Okay, so what does that tell you? That tells you that fitness is more important than weight. And for the same amount of fitness, even if you look at the changes in weight, they're more or less flat. So again, the point is when we work out, when we exercise, when we partake in Orange Theory, we are looking at gaining fitness. So what we want to impress upon you is don't get fixated on that number one thing that society puts a big stigma on, your weight, right? From everything from going to the clothing department and getting your sizes in your clothes, is everything focused on weight, but really focused on fitness. And I think Orange Theory, or we think that Orange Theory does a great job of allowing folks to really focus on fitness. And that fitness can be tallied and followed not only through the course of one workout, but throughout a program, as you all are doing right now. So this I thought was a very shocking and very profound study that looked at basically how running can actually reduce all-cause mortality and actually reduce your risk from having a cardiovascular complication. So if you look at this, for those folks, so one of a very significant mortality predictor is actually non-runners. Non-runners carry a decreased life expectancy of approximately 3 years. And if you look through this table, very quickly you can see that is in similar lines to being overweight or obese. Also, you can see it is close to hypertension, diabetes, and even a genetic risk. So the point of this slide is do something, because doing nothing carries an increased risk of mortality. So the really neat thing about this slide, what each of these figures or each of these points in the different colors shows the breakdown of exercise, whether it be time, which is minutes per week, distance, the frequency. But the trend that we want you to see here is get up and do something. As you can see here, the reduction in mortality as you run, just getting up and doing something decreases your mortality. And that benefit in reducing all-cause mortality continues as you exercise, okay? And as you move throughout time and actually move. And for our folks out there, we want you to really understand that doing something is better than nothing, number one. And number two, it doesn't take that much. Some of these folks are actually less than 51 minutes. And some of these folks are exercising more than 176 minutes per week. So you can see that over time, the mortality is still lower than not doing anything. And does this mean that those folks who are, it doesn't matter if you exercise more than someone else? Well, no, not really. What it means is that some of these folks who are exercising more than 176 minutes may see some added benefits. But the important point is, as long as you're doing something, you will still see the benefits of exercise on your health. You may not see it on your waist size or your weight itself, but you will have that added benefit. So we will have this slide from the American Heart Association, and Chris and I can talk about this together. But essentially, the American Heart Association has come up with 8 factors, social factors that we can all work together, either as individually, a family, community, to help each other and encourage each other to kind of think about these ways to impact cardiovascular health. So we'll kind of go through it really quickly.
Yeah, so this is called Life's Essential 8 from the American Heart Association. And we've talked so much about exercise up until now. Of course, this is for Orange Theory, but we thought it would be good just to talk about the 8 total things that the American Heart Association recommends all of us pay attention to maximize our health and minimize our risk of having a heart attack or stroke. So we talk about exercise. We won't have to get back into that. The official recommendation, though, is 150 minutes per week or more. So 2 to 3 classes at Orange Theory. In addition, just going through them, it talks about having a healthy diet. So a Mediterranean style diet that's high in sort of whole foods, fruits and vegetables, nuts, lean proteins is really great, and avoiding, saturated fats, ultra processed, shelf stable foods. Not smoking, not vaping, super important. Sleep was actually a new addition to this. So getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night is really important. And if you are not getting that, and you're feeling tired during the day, then you need to rearrange your life to somehow get that amount of sleep, because you are killing yourself by getting under 7 hours per night of sleep. Keeping a healthy weight is really important. As we highlighted repeatedly, it's not nearly as important as staying in good shape and being cardiovascularly fit, being able to exercise. But weight does associate with the risk of diabetes and high blood pressure. And so if you can, maintaining a healthy weight is important for reducing your risk of those things. And then, of course, this is going to require a doctor, but it's super important that all adults check their cholesterol, blood sugar, and blood pressure on a regular basis and make sure that those are okay. And even if you are the picture of health and you are lean and healthy and you can run 15 miles an hour on the treadmill, for 30 minutes, that does not mean that you also have perfect blood pressure, perfect cholesterol, and aren't diabetic. I have lots of people who are in my practice who are triathletes, who are unbelievable pictures of health, but their cholesterol is just genetically really high. And there is no way to know that if you don't check it. Same with their blood pressure. Some people just genetically have really high blood pressure despite, being otherwise completely healthy. So if you look great in the mirror, good for you, but it doesn't mean that you're off the hook for getting these things checked. So make sure that you're doing so on a regular basis with your doctor. All right, so that concludes the lecture, and thank God, because I feel like we were getting pretty deep in the weeds there, but hopefully that was informative for all of you. So we're going to go through some Q&A. I put together at the beginning of this some of the most common questions that we get asked that are relevant to Orange Theory, and then we are going to go over some of the questions you guys submitted in advance, and then, of course, we'll take any questions that you want to talk about now. So first Q&A, my heart rate is always high. So yeah, sometimes like people are just in class and they have like 30 splat points every class and their heart rate is just high all the time every time they exercise. This may just be normal for you. So if this is a long-standing stable thing and your resting heart rate is normal, but when you exercise, it just gets high and you feel fine, I really wouldn't worry about that. That's just what you're genetically predisposed to. If this is not normal for you, like if you were exercising for a while and, sticking more blue, orange, and now all of a sudden you're like in the red zone all the time, there could be a metabolic or some other issue going on, and you should probably just get checked out. So you could be anemic, meaning a low red blood cell count from bleeding or some other problem, heavy periods, blood in the stool, whatever. Your heart compensates for that by beating more frequently. Basically, in order to keep the oxygen delivery out to the body the same, if each unit of blood has less oxygen because it has lower red blood cells, the heart has to beat a lot more and a lot faster. And so your heart rate will go up. Overactive thyroid is another reason your heart rate could be high all the time. And then different forms of heart disease. So basically, if your heart rate is newly elevated and that is not your norm, especially if you're feeling more uncomfortable when you exercise, definitely talk to your doctor and consider these among other things.
And I think I'd just like to add, if your heart rate does stay high after exercise and you feel bad, that's another indicator where you may have to see one of us potentially too, because along with heart disease may be an arrhythmia potentially. And sometimes high strenuous exercise can, for some people, trigger an arrhythmia, or if you carry a family history of arrhythmia, that may be a signal of, okay, something may be going off. And a lot of times the first instance of patients realizing that they actually have a heart rhythm issue is actually noticing that their heart rate doesn't come down like it should, like 30 to 40 minutes after exercise.
Especially if it jumps, if like you're going 100 and all of a sudden you're like 150 and nothing really changed, that's very concerning. All right, so the corollary to this, my heart rate is always low.
Yeah, so my heart rate's always low. We hear a lot of, we may hear that a lot, but this may be normal too, especially if you have long-standing asymptomatic low heart rates. Like most common things we hear is my heart rate's always been low. Every time my pulse is checked, it's always in the 40s and 50s. So there is a genetic component to it. So not only can your heart rate be low, as Chris said really well, and kind of showed you the science behind athletes' hearts, which we have that. We typically do use that term, an athlete's heart, where they come in nice and slow. Otherwise, you could also have a low heart rate just by having a low heart rate. However, when we talk about disease pathology and low heart rates, if you're not feeling good and you check your heart rate and it's low, sometimes that can signal to us as cardiologists that there may be something going on with your natural pacemaker. We call this sinus node dysfunction. Sometimes electrical issues within the heart, the pacemaker of the heart, kind of triggers that, where the slow heart rate kind of predominates. And accompanying that slow heart rate, patients may feel tired, lethargic, maybe playing a round of golf just takes them forever, or they just feel really winded doing activities around the house. That could actually signal disease pathology.
Yep. All right. I used to get a lot more splat points. So this is a pretty common thing. I think a lot of people, when they first start doing Orange Theory, they start racking up the splat points and they're really proud of that. But, as the weeks and months go on, the splat points are not as high as they used to be. And maybe you're not even getting any. So there's two main possibilities. One is just you're getting in better shape. And remember, we talked about some of the long-term adaptations that the body does to increase the VO2 max that you're capable of achieving. And so you may have a heart that's getting a little bigger, and the stroke volume out of your heart may be increasing. That's what we call athlete's heart. Your muscles may be getting better at oxygen extraction. So when you think about that formula for VO2 and VO2 max, it's not as dependent on the heart rate because the other things in that equation have gotten a lot better. So if you want to get those flat points, you have to take it to the next level, right? Achieving that same VO2 doesn't require the same heart rate. So you've got to go to a higher VO2, which means you've got to increase oxygen demand, go faster on the treadmill, lift heavier weights, pull harder on that rower, and achieve greater watts. Another possibility could just mean that you are just not working as hard. Sometimes, exercise is uncomfortable. And when you hit that high orange or red zone, it's like painful. You're generating lactate and it doesn't feel good. And sometimes your mind kind of negatively conditions to that and subconsciously tries to avoid it. So that's pretty natural. We all sort of tend to avoid things that don't feel good. But it may just be that you are holding yourself back, consciously or not, and you need to just push a little bit harder to get your heart rate back up.
And I'll say that, with Orange Theory, you can, both possibilities is great to have that community environment, right? So not only do you see other folks who are in the similar situation as you pushing themselves, that also pushes you to get in better shape. And also is a constant reminder to you, and it may make you trigger that thought, are you working as hard as you can? So again, what fits really well with that community sense is looking at your peers who are there with you and developing that bond with those other folks in that gym. And I think that's a great way to address those same 2 points, Chris.
Personally, the coach laughs at me openly in front of others when I'm not working hard enough, and I find that very motivating. Okay, next up, I'm not losing as much weight as I want.
This is a classic one, right? So we hear about this all the time in clinic. We see this on TV, Instagram, social media, etc. You're working out, you're doing as much as you can, but yet you're not losing the weight. And for us, and we see that a lot of times diet has not stressed enough to people. And actually diet is more important than exercise. And this dictum probably is more important as you get older, okay? And so we think, oh, we'll just grab a cup of yogurt, add some granola, put some nuts on there, and make our way out the door. A lot of what we see as, quote, healthy it may be healthy in moderation, but you have to really think and look because there are a lot of hidden calories. And I think this picture is a great example of how we have to all be educated as we kind of make these decisions and realize that we may hide some calories that are in what we consider very healthy foods, which are pretty impressive. You see granola, nut butter, nuts, banana chips, shredded coconut, things that we add to our acai bowls and yogurt every day, all day in our shakes. Just stop and think real quick and measure, count, be mindful of what you're putting into your body.
If your goal is to lose weight.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it has been shown repeatedly in the science that people, when they start exercising, will also eat more calories.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from a variety of different things. You can, your brain tricks you, right? Again, your body is obsessed with getting calories and storing them as fat. Our survival for millions of years has depended on this. And so you trick yourself and you're like, well, I've worked out really hard today.
Mm-hmm.
I've earned this.
Right.
And then you just push back like an equal number of calories to what you just burned off. Or, you snap into a protein bar right after your workout. That's 300 calories. That's like half the workout that you just did. So it's super hard to burn calories with exercise, super easy to get them back in the diet. And so if your goal is weight loss, you have to pay very scrupulous attention to your diet. And it's really hard. I personally, when I joined Orange Theory, I didn't check my weight before and I still don't check it.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was not to lose weight. I could stand to lose a few pounds. My goal was to get into better shape and to improve my fitness. Right. Transformation Challenge, obviously, is for people who want to lose weight and are measuring their body fat, people who want to build muscle. But again, there is so much more to exercise than just burning calories and losing weight. And if you do want to lose weight, it has to be a full life change and not just going to the gym or Orange Theory or anything else, even every day. I'm not building enough muscle. So this is a common one too. It's important to point out that some people just genetically do not build as much muscle when they're doing weightlifting exercises compared to others. And we don't really fully understand why that is, and we can't change it anyway. But some people are just not going to bulk up as much as others from weightlifting. And there's nothing, unfortunately, you can really do about that. It's also possible you're just not pushing yourself hard enough. And this is especially true, I think, if you do the floor last at Orange Theory. A lot of people like to start on the treadmill. That's great. And I can certainly understand why, because the treadmill can be really hard. But if you're always doing the floor last, then you're going to be like wiped out by the time you get there. And you may not push yourself quite as hard as you could if you started there. So try starting on the floor. Try doing, you know, the total body classes where it's just lifting weights. You can even easily get weights at home and, you know, copy a couple of the lifts that you did at Orange Theory. It's certainly a lot easier than getting a treadmill or a rower at your house. So if your focus is on bulking up and building muscle, then these are some of the things to consider as we round out the transformation challenge.
You know, the other part of that, Chris, is that there are studies to also show that, like you said, don't always hit the same exercise at the same time for each workout, and varying it up is important. There have been studies to look at if you were to do cardio first, then go into your weight training, that you're bringing in a higher heart rate into that next exercise, and that can actually help fuel that portion. But then also conversely, you don't want to end always, like Chris is saying, with the weights, because at that point you may already have muscle fatigue, etc. So it's really important, even within your workouts, to vary it up and not hit that same kind of stigmata of the same routine. Keeping the body exposed to something fresh is very important.
So those were like the most common questions that we get, and hopefully those answers were relevant and useful to you. We got a bunch of questions submitted to us during the registration process. Going to go through those now. Please also feel free to drop questions into the message chat. We're going to monitor that, and we'd be happy to answer those questions as well. Okay, so first one up was a little bit longer, but gets to a point that I think is pretty common. This member said, I'm at a healthy weight. I exercise 3 to 4 times per week at OTF. I have a normal blood pressure. I eat a very healthy diet, but my cholesterol is high. And she gave her numbers here. LDL is the part of the cholesterol that is routinely measured that is most relevant to your risk of developing heart disease or stroke. LDL is the bad cholesterol. It's the cholesterol that causes plaque to form in the arteries. And the higher the LDL, the higher your risk. And an LDL of 159, like this person has here, is moderately elevated. This person also notes that their mother died of a stroke and their brother died of a heart attack, although they weren't living as healthy of a lifestyle. So what should I do? So this comes up all the time. And I love seeing patients with this because, you know, we're focusing on prevention rather than dealing with the fallout of a heart attack. And, you know, there's like formulas that we can use to plug in all of your numbers and estimate, you know, what your risk of a heart attack or stroke is in the next 10 years. Obviously, that increases greatly with age and as the blood pressure and cholesterol go up too. Another thing that can be super helpful, especially for people who are over 40, maybe have a family history or have like a borderline cholesterol, is something called a calcium score. So a calcium score is a CAT scan of your chest. It's done at all radiology centers around the triangle and state and country. And basically it's like a no IV required test where they just scan your heart and they scroll through your heart pictures and look to see if there's any plaque on the heart. Most plaque has calcium in it. It has nothing to do, by the way, with calcium in your diet, but most plaque has calcium in it. And calcium is super easy to see on a CAT scan. It shows up bright white. And so you can see here, going through these pictures, there's more and more bright white in the picture, and that's in the area of the coronary arteries where, you know, heart attacks happen. And the higher your score, the more plaque you have and the more risk you're at. And so happens all the time. People come in with a profile like the one we just shared. Sometimes we scan them and their calcium score is 0 and their risk is low, and they can probably just wait and see what happens with their cholesterol and focus on diet. And sometimes we scan them and their calcium score is really high, and then we got to, you know, do a stress test and all these other things to manage it and put them on cholesterol medications and so forth. So so a calcium score can be really helpful in that situation.
And I'd also say for that last member, like, you know, first of all, kudos to you. I mean, can you imagine what her numbers, or he or she's numbers would be if they didn't do what they were doing, you know, not exercising? So, you know, the fact that you are doing Orange Theory 3 to 4 times a week obviously is beneficial. So you are doing the right thing. And exactly what Chris is doing and saying that prevention is key. Taking that extra step is fantastic. So kudos to you.
Yeah. All right, next question is, would you give any different advice for keeping your heart healthy in your 20s, 30s versus your 40s, 50s, and beyond?
Right. So, we all have our take on this. And I think that, first of all, we can't change our genetics. We can't change the fact that we get older. So as we get older, yes, our bodies will change. And what you were doing in your 20s and 30s in terms of exercise and in terms of and pushing your peak heart rate will be much different than as you hit the 40s, 50s, and beyond. The one thing that we'll both take take a shot at this, but one thing that I'll stress is that as we get older, especially what's important is that balance between cardiovascular and weight training, and that resistance weights are more and more important, especially as osteoporosis and osteopenia hit. As you get older, low bone density, and that hits more along the menopause age. And so one thing that we will see in our clinics is that we have patients who start focusing more on just cardiovascular as they get older, and by walking or taking leisure activities such as that. But it's just as important to really focus on weight training and resistance training and those years as well. So as your body changes, it's really important to listen to your body, because what you were doing in your 20s and 30s in terms of vigorous exercise will definitely change as you get older. And it's important to maintain that exercise, as we were showing you before, and adapting your exercises as you get older.
Also point out that high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all these things get more common with age too. And so, the probability that each of us is going to end up in the danger zone on one of those metrics is fairly high at some point in our lives. If you're living a healthy lifestyle, eating healthy foods, but your blood pressure's high or your cholesterol is high, especially if you're over 50, medication is not a failure, right? Like it's a gift that we have the option of lowering your blood pressure or lowering your cholesterol using medication and extending your life and your high quality life with it. So if you're doing everything right, your numbers don't look great, and your doctor suggests going on medication, that is not a personal failure on your part. It is life. It is normal life, and it happens to almost everyone eventually. So, be smart, do what's good for your health. If that involves medication, take it, and view it as a gift and not a failure.
All right. If your body fat percentage from the in-body scan is in the yellow or red zone, can you still have a healthy heart? Can you take this, Chris?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. We already kind of talked about how when you look at your risk of dying, your level of fitness is more important than your BMI, which is, basically your weight adjusted for your height. Body fat has been divided over time into sort of more metabolically dangerous and less metabolically dangerous areas. So like in men, for example, a lot of like belly body fat is kind of inflammatory and increases the risk of heart disease. In women, more so like fat in the thighs and other parts of the body is less inflammatory. So just across genders and across parts of the body, fat can play a different role. But if, now that you're familiar with the concept of a calcium score and using a calcium score as a marker of plaque and as a marker of risk, I threw in this study here, which basically showed if you look at people across a range of BMIs, which is the different columns here. So BMIs ranging from 18.5, which is the lower end of normal, below that is underweight, all the way up to 30 and above, which is considered obese. You can look down here and look at their calcium scores. And the probability of having a calcium score of 0, meaning next to 0 plaque in the heart, it does go down as the BMI goes up, but a full 40+% of people with a BMI of 30 have a calcium score of 0. So you definitely can have a completely healthy, normal heart, despite having a lot of body fat. You are at greater risk over time of developing things that can cause problems with your heart health, like high blood pressure and high cholesterol, but you're definitely not guaranteed to get those things. And so, I would not view a red at baseline or even in follow-up on your in-body scan as a sign that your heart is in any kind of immediate danger. You want to try to achieve a healthy weight, but being fit is more important. And that's what we really advocate for. Next question was, I have high blood pressure managed with medication. Is it safe for me to push into the red zone at OTF?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. Remember, when we measure or talk about hypertension or high blood pressure, that's really resting blood pressure. So that's your blood pressure when you're not really doing anything at rest. We encourage our patients not only to have their blood pressure checked at their doctor's office or their provider's office, but to do it at home as well. And so when you push yourself into the red zone when you're OTF, all of our blood pressures, whether you have high blood pressure or a diagnosis of elevated blood pressure or hypertension or not, your body will naturally adapt and increase that blood pressure to get that blood out to your muscles, which are demanding and craving oxygen and demanding nutrients as you push your metabolic limits in the short term, as Chris was telling you, as well as the long term. So yes, it is safe for you to push yourself into the red zone. And more importantly, I think that it's important to watch your blood pressure after a workout and see what it's doing, and also the day after that. So those are where you can kind of dovetail a lot of what you see with your blood pressure into your workouts.
All right, next question was, why does the body continue to burn calories 24 hours after an Orange Theory workout? So this gets into the concept of EPOC, or excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, and basically just means that your metabolism doesn't drop down to resting rates the second you stop exercising. There is a cool down period which can sometimes last for several hours or the rest of the day. And I think we all intuitively know this, right? Like, you walk out of Orange Theory and you're still sweating. Sometimes you go home, take a shower, and you're still sweating after that. And that's because your metabolic rate is still elevated and you aren't burning additional calories during that time. Exactly how many calories you burn and exactly how long this lasts for depends on a lot of factors, including what you did when you exercised and genetic factors too. There's this myth, I think, among members, maybe perpetuated by Orange Theory, that if you hit exactly 12 splat points, you're going to achieve EPOC. And if you hit 11, you're not. That's definitely not the case. It's different for every person. And I don't think that I would change my exercise to achieve exactly 12 or any other specific number of splat points. You just want to push yourself as hard as you reasonably can during your exercise. And the more you do and the harder you push yourself, the more calories you're going to burn both during and after the exercise. And if your goal is weight loss, then make sure that you don't rush home and immediately eat all those calories right back.
Right.
All right, so other questions. So we got one question submitted here, but I would love for you guys listening to submit other questions, really anything that might be relevant to the rest of the crew here, and we'd be happy to go through them. So we're looking at the chat window right now. It says, from a cardiovascular point of view, what's the importance of recovery and rest days? I know it's important for muscles and the heart is a muscle, but are there any other benefits?
Right. So and we'll both take a crack at this, but yes, it's very important to have rest days included. Number one is, as Chris was talking, as we talked about this in Orange Theory, there is a period after which the exercise, the physical work is done, but yet the metabolic demands of your muscles continues, and that can continue for up to 24 hours. So that being said, constantly burning that engine, if you were to continue with vigorous workouts, that does put some strain on the body at some point. So the body does need time for rest. It does need time to regulate itself, get back to almost like a soft reset. The other part of it is, if you look in a lot of studies, they look at something called heart rate variability and heart rate recovery. So after a workout, you want to see your heart rate come down naturally in a gradual state. And also your heart rate variability also, which is a sign of exercise tolerance and how good you're doing, is also quite variable for various states of health. So rest is just as important as pushing your body and exercising. And coupled with that, which I think is very kind of underemphasized in a lot of providers' practices, is the benefits of sleep. and how important 7 to 9 hours is important on the recovery process as well. Because remember, back to your point of the lactic acid buildup, your body needs time to process all of that and get it out of the system so that you can begin exercise again.
Yeah. I think it also has to do with sustainability too, right? Like if you're not taking any rest periods or rest days, it's pretty grueling and you can become pretty sore. You're not giving your body a chance to recover, and it can be really hard to sustain that over a longer time period. And I think you're going to end up burning out faster and do worse. Another question that came through, I've been hearing more and more about the benefits of a plant-based diet, and I've become surprised that the medical advice isn't more clearly guiding us around this question. Is the evidence pretty clear around that and what you recommend? Yeah, so I can start on this one. So yeah, so a plant-based or vegan diet or nearly vegan diet has been shown to be really, really beneficial for health. If you look at, communities around the world that really just eat plants, they naturally have very low levels of cholesterol, very low rates of hypertension, and very, very low incidence of heart disease and stroke. And we do recommend it quite a bit to our patients. The problem is sustainability. So we frequently hear from folks that they don't want to do it because they grew up eating food a certain kind of way, or they have a family and they feel like they can't do it without their whole family getting on board, which is really hard. Or they do it for a while and then back off. But in some cases, we have patients switch to a plant-based diet and the effects can be pretty dramatic. So we're generally in favor of it. I don't think that it's an essential requirement for having good health. You can have a healthy diet that does include non-plant sources. The additional benefit that you can get from switching to all plant is hard to quantify. Doing research on nutrition in general is really tough. The standard in medicine is something called a randomized controlled trial, where you treat one set of people one way and another people another way, and they don't really know what kind of treatment they're getting, so they can't change things around that. You clearly can't do that with diet. You can't randomize people because it's hard to sustain, and people of course know what they're eating. So nutrition science is tough for that reason, but there's a lot of studies that have shown the benefits. There's books that I send people to by Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, and others who are physicians who have studied this and the effect on the heart, and it's good. So,
and the other thing that's really neat is that
vegetarian right here.
Yeah, speaking as a vegetarian, there are definitely some health benefits to that. But one thing that I will say that in line with what whoever's commenting is saying is that there is more and more data, which is actually opening up the idea, especially in a society where that has been, especially in certain geographical parts of the country, whether it be in the Midwest or the South, et cetera, where meat is part of the culture and the diet, not only the diet, but the culture itself, is the actual notion of flexitarian, which is being more flexible with that diet, introducing more plants based, so that it's an introduction to it as a gateway to introduce more healthy living that way. So you are indeed, there's a lot more data on it, and it's actually opening up that premise of flexitarian.
And I think, when it comes to sustainability,
exactly,
we're much more likely to see people stick with it if it's not so rigid and dogmatic.
Exactly.
And we have to be practical. Okay. Thanks for these questions. More and more are coming in. Someone asked, how much should we be paying attention to the number of hours we are sitting during the day, particularly at a computer? Is OTF just a Band-Aid on the bad effects of our sedentary work lives? And how does this all relate to our heart health? Great question. So I'm actually going to go back to a previous slide. I don't know who drew all over my slides, but I'm going to remind you of this one from back here that looked at the amount of running that a person does and the effect on their survival. So just to remind you all, sort of going from left to right here, we're going from non-runners to people who are running more and more and more, basically more minutes per week, more distance per week, more frequently, and so forth. And you can see that when it comes to the risk of death, it goes down when you start running, and it just kind of stays at the same level the more and more you go. So when it comes to like mortality and survival, I think going to Orange Theory a couple times a week gets you there for sure. Even if the rest of your day you're spending just kind of sitting and not doing a whole lot. But if your goal is excellent fitness and weight loss and maintaining a healthy weight, then the more you do, the better, for sure. And so, you know, you may not achieve your goals with just, you know, a couple hours per week at Orange Theory, depending on what you're doing in the rest of your time. So I frequently recommend patients make changes to increase the amount of exercise they're doing, even at work. So standing desks are great. If you combine that with like a walking pad, which is like a very small, compact treadmill that goes like a couple miles per hour, and it's meant to be just walking. That's really great. I mean, you could walk like an additional 5 to 10 miles per day while you're standing at your desk. If you're doing Zoom calls, you know, take it, you know, with headphones and go for a walk. So there's like a lot of opportunities, I think, in the workday where you can potentially increase your exercise, but you also have to just acknowledge the reality of, you know, Western modern civilization, which is that a lot of us are kind of chained to a desk, and there's not a lot you can do about that, and control what you can control, which is after work and on the weekends in that case.
Yeah, a lot of times what Chris and I will do is, you know, we'll ask our patients and we'll ask other folks, just, you know, and we do this upon ourselves, park farther away in the parking lot, something small. You know, don't park right next to the building or the entrance of where you work. Park farther away. Use the stairs at
Park
work.
2 miles away.
Take the stairs at work. I mean, even if you implement a few minutes of exercise or doing something during the day to break up the monotony. But the truth of the matter is we're living in a society that is more connected to the internet. A lot of our work is done in front of computers. Even as physicians, even though we see patients all the time, but a lot of our time is spent charting and handling epic questions and things of that nature. We spend a lot of time in front of the computer. Sure. So, you know, that's why instead of you looking at Orange Theory as a Band-Aid, it's actually more of a solution, right? It's a direct solution to what you're dealing with at work. And but I think the questions that you raise are indeed that how best to incorporate exercise into your daily work routine.
So a couple of the questions that came through were about sleeping longer. So some of you said that, like, I just can't sleep for more than 6 hours. And if I go to bed earlier, I just wake up earlier. I think there was another question, how can a person teach their body to sleep longer? So, okay, so this is great, and getting into the weeds a little bit more. So there actually is a subset of people who just do not need as much sleep. And this has been proven in the science. It's a small subset. It's a lot smaller than the people who actually get, you know, 6 hours a night for sleep, but you might just be one of them. I add some caveats here. This is only true if you are never tired during the day because you only got 6 hours of sleep. If you're waking up and it's not because of anxiety, stress, poor sleep quality or something else, and you're accomplishing all the things you want to do. Maybe you just don't need as much sleep, but that is a small number of people. Most of us are just not getting enough sleep. And I think that a lot of it comes down to issues of what we call sleep hygiene. So making your bedroom a conducive place to sleep, not watching TV right before bed in your bed, which tends to keep you awake. Not doing stuff in your bedroom like work and other things that are not really like sleep related. Making sure that you're controlling the temperature and the light well. Sometimes people just kind of like overheat over the course of the night and wake up because of that. And so it's like really just curating like a great experience for sleeping as much as you possibly can. You spend a third of your life in your bed. So you should really focus a lot of resources and time optimizing that.
What's really interesting to that same point of, separating, sleep from your other parts of life, i.e. work. They did a recent study not too long ago looking at whether, looking at your phone before going to sleep, was that really the trick? Was the light, or what was that, the light that you get from it, the blue light that they talk about, and winding down, so to speak. Well, they looked at it, and it's not really whether it's the light, whether it's the blue light, whether it's the fact that the phone is on, it's the engagement of the mind in that activity prior to sleep. So what they're saying is the reason why we want to take an hour or so to wind down, power down those devices is because everything now lives in the palm of our hand. Email, social media, phone, entertainment, everything, that putting that away and not the light that your phone emits is actually the more important of the two.
Anxiety
it produces. And what do I have to do tomorrow? Oh, I just read that email that needs to be answered. Let me just fire off a reply. Well, that gets your mind thinking about that while you sleep. The other thing that, that Chris and I will also encourage our folks that we see in clinic is that if you are having problems with sleep, there are some organic things that you have to think about as well. Sleep apnea is very underdiagnosed in the population, and some of our more fit patients actually have sleep apnea. And so, getting a good screening for sleep apnea from your primary care physician's office.
I'll tell them what it is.
Oh yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. We use that vernacular so much in our clinics, but sleep apnea is basically when someone goes down to sleep at night, getting disrupted sleep because they're not getting enough oxygen. Now, there's two types of sleep apnea. One is central, where the brain's not telling the body to take deep breaths in while they sleep, but the other one's called obstructive sleep apnea. So literally where the tongue, as you lay on your pillow, it obstructs your breathing. You're not getting enough oxygen to your brain, your heart, your muscles, etc. And some patients, as a result, stop breathing at night. And so they'll get disruptive sleep. They can never hit REM, which is an important part of sleep to get that restorative sleep. And they have a really, quote, bad night. They may not sleep as long, and then it kind of carries on to the next day. They're tired, they're fatigued. It can lead to high blood pressure, diabetes, heart rhythm issues, heart disease, etc. Headache. So that's why when we talk about exercise is a way to prevent sleep apnea. And also, if you come up with a regimen or a system for the day, a schedule for the day, getting even more of a routine and implementing exercise as part of your routine has shown to improve sleep as a whole.
Yeah, sure. All right. It's 10 after, so we'll just take one or two more questions. Let's see. We got a question about cold plunges.
Yeah.
You want to take that one?
All right. Yeah. So actually, cold plunges is a great question. From Dr. Shah. And yes, related to me. Cold plunges. So there has been some good data on the cold plunging, actually. And so looking into it, that part of cold plunging, there's a couple of different ways about it. One is looking actually at the initial shock factor, what that cold instantly does to the body over time, and looking at its effects and how much time is really meant to spend or is needed to get some benefits in that. Some of it has been shown to be as little as 30 seconds up to a couple minutes. And so obviously on social media, there's some good and some bad in terms of the benefits of it, but they also are starting to show that perhaps not doing it every day is actually beneficial, because there is this part of the body that if you were to do it every day, it almost gets accustomed to that. And then not doing it allows the body to, again, reset. Any thoughts about that from your end?
I've never tried it, but it looks cool. Hunter said, as someone who works out with pre-workout or an energy drink around 200 to 400 milligrams a day, I guess caffeine, sometimes more if I coach, is there a concern in heart health, increase in issues with doing OTF workouts? So yeah, so caffeine. So a lot of people take caffeine before exercise, and can definitely like improve your alertness and raise your heart rate during your exercise and maybe improve your stamina. Kind of controversial relationship between caffeine and the heart. Some recent studies showed that caffeine actually really doesn't increase the risk of that many heart rhythm problems. I would say it's like very personalized. I tell people, like, if you feel bad when you take caffeine, if you feel jumpy, if you feel your heart skipping, then it's probably not a good idea for you, and I would avoid it. I think also, like, if you rely heavily on caffeine to be alert and awake during the day, like, you need to look at your sleep patterns and your sleep quantity and make sure that that's okay, and that you're not compensating for a problem there. But if you can do without the caffeine, but you feel like you work out a little better with it and it doesn't cause any negative effect, there's really no problem for the heart.
Right. Agreed. I completely agree. I think the effects of caffeine on heart arrhythmia, which is what I deal with most of the time, is vastly overplayed and kind of in the out there. And so moderation is key.
So it's past our time, so we're going to wrap it up here, but we really, really thank all of you for joining us tonight. And we hope that this information was helpful as you think about, your own exercise routine and your goals and your life. Hopefully you have a little bit better understanding on concepts like VO2 and VO2 max now, and what the body does to deliver that, and how our bodies change over time. So we included our emails at the end here. If you have any really burning questions that we didn't have the time to answer, please feel free to reach out to us there. If you think maybe you need a cardiologist, we'll be happy to help you there as well. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Erin, Ashley, is there anything else that you guys wanted to add here?
Nope, I think we're all good. Thank you so much.
All right. Have
Thanks,
a great
guys.
night, everyone. Thanks so
Good
much.
night, everyone. Take care.